I honestly don't know what I saw. I was in Iraq in 2006 and we were searching an area that had a cemetery and catacombs. The catacombs were being used to hide ammo, explosives, and IED material. When we got to the cemetery and stacked up to clear the catacombs with outer cordon covering our asses, with HMMWVs and M3A2 Bradleys. We cleared one area of the catacombs and heard a commotion outside and heard Arabic and Kurdish. We were luckily done with the first search and starting to stack up to exit. We came out and saw 6 guys covered in blood and pretty gruesome injuries. The interpreter talked to them while we tended to their wounds. They said a jinn tricked them and their cell of 30-some people used the location to hide their contraband. We didn't understand what a jinn was and the interpreter told us to use a ghoul of sorts, an evil trickster. We headed to the catacomb they occupied and there were about 20 bodies eviscerated, literally. As soon as we entered, we saw a dark figure. We had NVGs and IR lights, so we could see whatever it was, but the bodily dimensions were off. Hands and feet way too big for a long, skinny, wire-like limbs and a normalish skull size, with refractive eyes. I don't know the color, because the NVGs are green. Anyways, the figure skitters away and makes it through a small hole in the wall that went down. So, we grenaded that hole. We got back up to the top, out of the catacombs, and reported what we saw. Our commander and more saw it all. They took all our cameras, told us, due to OPSEC, to not discuss it with anyone. It's been over 14 years, so I see no harm. The creepiest thing is that it said Inshallah before exiting. Which means, if God wills, or God willing. We got another interpreter to talk to before the gag order and he said that jinn are genies. I was passed and I didn't get 3 wishes. He said, count yourself lucky. If you made a wish, it would be like a deal with the devil and it would backfire. Then after a wish, your soul would be marked and claimed. A little unnerving. My entire childhood, my father and I used to take late-night walks due to his insomnia from shift work. Our neighborhood is considered very safe and ultimately was an urban neighborhood besides one of the roads towards the back of the neighborhood being lined with thick forest for about a mile and about a quarter deep which made a circle back in itself. All of these walks are very dear memories of mine except one and it ended being the last one. Along the road with the tree line, there was a single street light to illuminate a small plot of land that someone owned but was very overgrown and ill-kept. It was very common for us to walk this road to enjoy the sounds of the forest, the lack of illumination, and the ease of circling back. One ordinary night as we were walking and making conversation, my father abruptly stopped, pulled me close, put a hand over my mouth and crouched with me, and pointed towards the single illuminated plot roughly 100 yards away. At first, I didn't see anything and thought he was pulling my leg, but just as I began to protest his grasp, I see a very small humanoid figure, roughly 3 feet in height, scrawny, with long limbs, materialize out of the plot's brush line and cautiously take in its surroundings before signaling towards the brush. After a few seconds, 2 other small, humanoid figures materialize as well. After a brief moment of what looked to be a discussion, all 3 make a dash for the forest tree line. Once this happened, my father picked me up, threw me over his shoulder and made a break for our home which was roughly a half-mile back. Mind you, my father is 6 inches 5, 220 pounds and I was roughly 120 pounds at this time and he never showed signs of slowing due to his fear and adrenaline. After this night, we never took late-night walks. He installed 4 bright motion detection lights around our acre plot and brought home a dog. The few times I've tried bringing it up, he doesn't want to discuss and made it clear he never wanted to. Those figures still give me chills and the image of the 3 huddled together is very vivid 15 years later. So, this happened to my son when he was 17 years old. We lived in New Mexico at the time. My son, Cody, was riding along with his friends Drew and Alex. They were in Drew's truck and Drew was driving. It was night and they were heading to Drew's house. Drew lived out in the country, so the road they were on was isolated and surrounded by desert. In fact, that whole area is flat and mostly dirt. As they're driving along, they see a man standing in the middle of the road. Drew slows down and they all expect the guy to move off to the side. The guy doesn't move. He just stands there. Drew slows to a stop. The guy is standing just outside the light from the headlights. He's wearing jeans and some sort of long-sleeve shirt. They couldn't make out the features of the guy's face, but they could tell he was facing them. Nobody moves for a few seconds. The kids start to talk about going around him, but aren't sure if they should pass by this guy or turn around and go another way. Suddenly, the guy drops to all fours and starts running towards the truck. All the kids start screaming. Drew slams the truck into reverse and floors it. Now, they're going backwards on this dark country road and this guy is chasing them on all fours. And he's keeping up with the truck. Drew goes faster and finally the guy drops out of sight. Drew turns the truck around and they all came back to our house. I was in the living room when they came running in, slammed and locked the door, and went tearing up the stairs to Cody's room. I went up to see what was going on and this is when they told me the story. I've never seen them so pale and frightened. They were completely freaked out. This happened on a Friday night around 8 p.m. These were kids that normally would rather be anywhere except home on a weekend. That weekend they stayed at our place the whole time. They didn't go out at all and then only left because they had school on Monday. It took a month before they wanted to go out again at night. They would go anywhere during the day, but at night they usually gathered at our house. After a little research, they all agreed that it was a skinwalker. Even to this day, if I bring up that night, Cody and his friends will get really quiet and look scared. It took a long time for them to get past it, and they still think that talking about it will make it come back. A while back, I lived way out in the middle of nowhere in Oklahoma. Due to coyotes and other animals, I'd always go outside with a knife or machete. Well, one night I was taking out the trash. I was 11 or 12 at the time. The trash can was a good 50 feet from the house, surrounded by bushes and shrubs. Well, I put the trash in the can and went to head back when something reached from the shrubs and latched into my ankle. I figured I was caught on a branch or something, so I pulled my foot harder. That's when I realized that those were fingers wrapped around my ankle, and that they were far too long to be human. I swung the machete at whatever was grabbing me, and I heard the most blood-curdling screech I've ever heard. I ran to the house. It was one of those shipping container-shaped trailers. The thing about those trailers is, you get a hole in the side panel and animals can get trapped under it. I heard it under the house that night, and it sounded like a big dog or something. Never found out what it was, luckily. Not so creepy and not so much my childhood, but when I was a young teen, I was sitting on the floor in my mom's bedroom playing Animal Crossing when it got dark out. I didn't have a light on because I was in there for several daylight hours, so when it got dark, I only had the hallway light. I remember looking out the window to my left cause I saw some movement and seeing nothing, just a tree branch next to my porch slightly shaking. I brushed it off but then remembered we didn't have any trees in our backyard. It was about a half-mile of old farmland. I stared at the branch trying to figure out where it was coming from, and my eyes trailed it until it came to an end against a white oval-like surface. I was squinting to see what it was when it moved. It turned, looked at me, and then slowly lumbered off. I figured I had seen a deer with some kind of color mutation, and that my eyes just messed with me cause I didn't have my glasses on. We normally had a herd or two of deer that grazed in the backyard. It wasn't until later I realized that none of the herds showed up during the time I saw whatever it was. None of the deer had a color mutation either, at least the regulars didn't. I ignored it for a few days, but then about a week later I was sleeping when I woke up in the middle of the night. I don't know what woke me up, but I have a large window next to my bed that I leave the blinds up on because my dog likes looking out. I look at my dog and he's on alert, looking out the window. I grab my glasses and look where he was fixated on and see the thing again. I got a better look at it this time, but it had fur so black that its body wasn't really visible, only having the light of the moon, garage light off to the side. I figured I was dreaming or something, but as it moved across my yard back towards the empty field, my dog's head tracked it. My dog was shivering slightly and normally he barks at the smallest things, but it seemed like he was trying to be quiet. I grabbed my sketchbook that was on the dresser next to my bed and quickly drew what I saw. I never felt scared of whatever it was, just kinda peaceful? In a way. It seemed like it was just patrolling the area, and I happened to catch it on its nightly rounds. So about a year ago, I was helping a friend of mine move to New Mexico. She has 3 young kids, so the plan was to take the last little load in her car late at night so the kids would sleep through the ride. At around 1:30 a.m. After we had been in New Mexico for about an hour, this strange animal just appeared beside us and was running at the same speed as the car. I flipped out and asked how fast she was going, 75 miles per hour. It was right beside us, keeping up and looking directly at me. I can't even really explain what it looked like. Almost like jackalope, but it was solid gray and had huge black eyes and was the size of a medium-sized dog. After maybe 30 to 40 seconds of running beside us, it got up on its hind legs into the wilderness and disappeared. I was absolutely distraught for a minute. And the whole time I just had this feeling of dread. Right, so I've got a story. I've lived in Florida most of my life until October 2020 when I moved to upstate SC. Lived with my grandparents in the mountains around Salem for a little while before moving to an outer suburb of Greenville. The backyard of my house in Greenville had a downward slope and a creek at the bottom, then an upward slope on the other side leading to another set of houses. The creek led into a large patch of woods one more house down past mine, a good 50-ish acres. Not long after moving in, I went and explored the creek and found a small shard of pottery half buried in the ground. It was dark greenish and had a few basic floral designs on it. I brought it inside cause I was planning to contact the nearby university to ask if it had any significance, but I never actually got around to doing it. One day shortly after that, sitting on my back porch around noon, I started hearing whistles, like some guy was calling his dog or something, but it was the exact same tone and melody every single time. It never changed. I looked around and didn't see anyone, but I could pinpoint where the sound was coming from. It was coming from the patch of woods down the creek the first couple times I heard it, then slowly moved out of the woods and into the backyard of the house behind mine. Again, I didn't see anyone, and it was still the same whistle, almost like it was a recording on repeat. This happened every couple days for a few weeks. Always the same exact whistle and no one else to be seen but me. I didn't think anything of it at the time until I moved again late last year to Spartanburg County. Obviously, I won't say exactly where I am, but I'm in the northern part of a very rural area, with plenty of woods around along with plenty of coyotes and other wildlife. I hadn't heard the whistle in a long while, probably about a year. Couple weeks ago, I was sitting outside my house at about 9 p.m. having a bonfire. I heard a pack of coyotes go nuts around a quarter mile away, which isn't unusual, so I didn't think anything of it. After a couple minutes, they went completely silent and I didn't hear any other wildlife, not even crickets. Then out of nowhere, I heard the same exact whistle again. It was coming from a ditch next to the road in front of my house about 30 yards from where I was sitting. I froze and sat there listening as I knew that this time something was up. Why am I hearing the same exact whistle as I've heard in the backyard of a previous house over an hour's drive away? I waited another few minutes and heard it one more time, then silence. Another few minutes passed, then the usual wildlife and crickets started going again. The rest of the night I felt watched, and now every time I go out at night I feel the same way. I don't know if it's a walker for sure considering all I've got are a few identical whistles, but it's definitely not normal. Whatever it might be, there's no doubt it followed me from Greenville over an hour away. I tried ruling it out by saying it's birds, but the timing is just way too irregular. Surely I'd hear it more often, right? Instead of a few times last summer and then not at all until the middle of September a year later? Looking for answers on what it might be and what to do about it, if anything. As far as the pottery shard, it was left in a closet at the previous house in Greenville, which has now been rented out to another tenant.